This morning, I was reading the New Testament, and I came across the passage of the multiplication of loaves and fish. And as I was reading it and thinking of the disciples' reaction, I thought, man, I'm going to have to make myself vulnerable, because here I am about to talk about how to engage the culture of others. And so many times, I'm like the disciple. When I see the multitude of crowds and the magnitude of their need, my first reaction is, maybe we need to send them home. But here I am. And when I think it's funny because I grew up in an island. I grew up in Puerto Rico, and I didn't travel much. So it wasn't up until I was 18 that I left the island to go to New York for college. My idea of a different culture was somebody from the neighboring island of the Dominican Republic. And now I realize how similar we are. But in my current adventure, leading Cadespa, we create economic opportunities for people living in extreme poverty in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So we're over 100 employees, and I have local teams in 11 countries. And when I think of, how did I get here? I think it really started when I realized that God had blessed me with gifts. So growing up, I always questioned everything, like a toddler that is always asking why, but why? And in school, I started getting good grades, and I think it was around sixth grade. That was my rebel years. I was like, what's the point? Like, I work hard to get good grades, to get into a good school, and then a job, but then we die. Like I want more. Like, what's going on? So because I was slacking off, I went to confession, and the priest told me in Spanish, Michelle, saber para servir, which translates into knowledge for the sake of service. And I remember thinking, like, oh my goodness, like, it means that I have all these opportunities. Like, I can actually go to school when there's so many girls around the world that don't have access to school. I can develop my talents, I can learn things, and the more I develop my talents, the more I can serve and love others. And how I love others has an everlasting effect. So that is eternal. So for me, that became like an engine. And when I ran into Matthew Kelly and his books, there's a book called The Rhythm of Life, and he talks about our unique desires and needs, legitimate needs and talents, and how, here, I don't want to misquote him, is that relationship is how God reveals to us our unique path to salvation. So my need for wanting more, like I wanted more than just a sticker and more than just a job, was put in there by God. And with that is this, he talks about, we all have this universal hunger to be and become all who we are created to be. And I was always intrigued about the law. I went to law school. And when I was in law school, I wanted to study public health and health policy, so I did a joint degree, and then I started practicing law. And I came into, it's a Japanese concept for reason of being, and it's called ikigai. And it basically says, like, okay, what are you good at? What do you love? What does the world need? And this is how you figure out what you want to do with your life. And for me, I mean, as a Catholic, what spoke to me the most was, what does the world need? And I realized how we live in time. So the needs of a particular society for a particular moment might change, which meant I needed to be open to that. So, in the church we talk about receptivity, about that openness to the Holy Spirit. And I realized that I had to not only develop my skills and my talents, but also I need to be detached from them. And there's a certain openness and poverty of okay, God, I did all this, but I surrender them, like whatever you want, however you want to use me. And when the opportunity to lead Codespa came along, I was able to pray about it and discern and like engage in the adventure because I had this attitude of, praying about things of like, the more successful, like at the UN or this, of like, okay, God, like, is this still what you want me to do? And thinking of what the world needs, there's 700 million people living in extreme poverty. That means that they live in less than $1.90 a day, right? And in the root of Codespa's mission is that we believe that because of their dignity as human beings, God gave them intellect and will and abilities, and they're fully capable with the right conditions to come out of the cycle of poverty through sustainable and dignified work and employment. So for us, following God's calling of like, for them to become all that they were created to be, for us, it was really about, hold on. Okay, for us, it was about creating, excuse me, I lost my page. Okay, here we go. Okay. It was about creating the conditions in their environment so they can, through their work, come out of poverty. So work was not just a means of increasing their income, but also as a means of self-development and growth, a means of creating virtuous cycles for people. So you've all heard about the old adage, like give somebody a fish, they eat for a day, teach somebody how to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime. So my team in Codespa, we teach them not only how to fish, but also how to become a fisherman or a fisherwoman and how to become a fish merchant. So now they're not just, teaching their children how to fish, they're actually selling it, they're employing people. So in our core, what we do is we incubate and accelerate entrepreneurs, fostering the spirit of entrepreneurship among the most vulnerable so that they can transform their community from within. And we do this by engaging and respecting their culture. So the reason that we have 11 teams in the local countries, is because they're in the community, constantly assessing their needs. Like, do they need clean water? Do they need education? What is it that they need? And then they, with the community, listening to what's important for them, they'll come up with a market-based solution to that problem, right? So what are the stores? Like, who are the buyers? Who are the suppliers? So in Angola is a country that 85% of its population live from agriculture. And because they have had one of the longest civil wars in Africa, there's very high level of extreme poverty. So one of the things that my team noticed was that the farmers, every time they would bring the crops, they would put them on like sacks or like potato sacks. And these critters would come and like ruin them, like eat the stuff and ruin. So they were losing 50% of their crop. So in an effort to not lose it, they would have to like sell it all the same day, which meant that the price that they would sell it for would be less. So we're thinking, and we're like, well, they just need a container. They need to be able to store their crops. And it would have been easier for us to be like, okay, let's just fly, containers from the United States, $7, that's great. But in our DNA of our organization, it's really empowering them. So like if they're living on $1.90 a day, they can't afford a $7 container. what happens when we leave? How did we actually empower them? So our team, we're thinking about this, we're praying about this, and one of my team members noticed that there were factories nearby that were discarding these like barrels and like oil drums. So we hired somebody to tell us like, how can we recycle these oil barrels and how can we sanitize them? Can we use them? Can we repurpose them? And we got the training, we figure out how to do it. And then it's like, okay, get a welder. How do we like weld lids so we can actually have a storage container? So the beautiful thing was that from this, many things happened. So one was we taught members of the community like how to be the one to like sanitize and clean the oil drums, how to weld the container. And now the farmers had access to these storage containers for their crops. There were also new businesses. So now the people that learned how to weld, they're like selling the lids for the containers. There's other people that are actually cleaning and repurposing the drums, and they're selling the drums. And now in the event that my team leaves, they already figured out how to do it themselves. And the beautiful thing about this is really the beauty of human intellect and will, and like with the right training or opportunity, we can really make amazing things, right? And as a young executive, sometimes it's funny when I think about like I've been traveling to the world and very remote regions and indigenous communities, and I'm thinking like, wow, God, like I would have never pictured myself here, but and especially when I think of like all this, the multitude of needs. So like I have a pipeline of 100 projects that need funding or this or that. And I think of the disciples in that passage of like, send them home, maybe we can't go there. But God says, bring me your loaf, like bring me what you have, bring me that fish, bring me that loaf. And it's a reminder to me of like, okay, well, this is what I have, this, I can learn, this is what I have, you take care of them, like you feed them, you open up the doors, open up the opportunities. And I really encourage you as you're like discerning those three things, right? So one is like, we may not be successful, like I'm not a big corporate lawyer to the eyes of the culture, and people might think like, why did you leave working at the UN and this to do this? But we're gonna be faithful. And I encourage you to pray like, Lord, this is my drive. This is my ambition. This is my talent. Take it. Just tell me how you want me to serve. How do you want me to fulfill what you created me to be? And I promise you that you're going to see amazing, amazing things in your life, especially if you keep that prayer life. Confession, sister, I am a great proponent, and spiritual direction. And the sacraments, the wisdom of the church. And yeah, it's going to be great. Thank you.